If you're reading this, it's because I have no other choice. Nobody will listen to me, not even the police. It's only a matter of time before they come for me. And when they do, this is the only evidence of the truth. There's something under the boardwalk in Paradise Point, and it's hungry. October is always a terribly slow month. We're barely open, but the owners want to squeeze every penny they can before this town is completely empty. Even on a Friday night, it's already a ghost town. That's where this all began. A cold, deafeningly quiet night at the record shop I spend my days working in. Spectre's Records and Rarities, a store that was really dead in the water until vinyl made a huge comeback. We also sold shirts that you might find a middle schooler wearing, even though they wouldn't be able to name a single song off the album they were donning. It was really a place frozen in time. The smell of dust and decay of better days always filled the room. The best way to pass the time on a night like this would be to find a forgotten record to play. That was my favorite game, finding an album I'd never heard of and giving it a chance to win me over. After all, if I'm not going to play them, who will? Tonight's choice, Secret Treaties by Blue Oyster Cult. Of course, I knew Don't Fear the Reaper. Who doesn't? I never sat down and listened to their albums, even though their logo and album artwork always intrigued me. I've retired the familiar sounds of ELO off the turntable and introduced it to something new. Seeing the album made me think of my dad. I remember him telling me about seeing them live with Uriah Heep at the old Spectrum in the 70s. I bet he still had that ticket stub too. Oh god, he loved that place. I even remember seeing him shed a tear the day they tore it down. The opening chords of Career of Evil blared out of my store speakers as I dropped the needle. Had my mind not been elsewhere, I wouldn't have startled myself into spilling my coffee. The previously white album cover and sleeve were now browned and tainted. Who would want it now? Looks like it was coming home with me. After all, a song titled Harvester of Eyes certainly had a place in my collection. The owner wouldn't care anyway. He had jokingly threatened to set the store ablaze for insurance money. Had this shop not been attached to others on this boardwalk, I wouldn't have put it past him. The opening track sold me, and given the state of business, I decided it was time to close up shop. The only thing louder than BOC was the ticking clock that sat above an old Plan 9 from Outer Space poster. Just as the second track reached its finale, I lifted the needle. I retrieved one of our spare plastic sleeves to prevent any more damage and stowed it away in my backpack. I took a walk outside to see if there were any stragglers roaming the boards. All I could see was a long, winding road of half-closed shops and stiffened carnival rides lit only by the amber sky of an autumn evening. Soon it would be dark, and the boardwalk would belong to the night and all that inhabited it. The garage doors of the shop slammed shut with a finality that reminded me of the months to come. The sound echoed around me, only to be consumed by the wind. It wasn't nearly as brutal as the gusty winter months, but it swirled with the open spaces as if it were dancing with the night. The padlock clicked as I scrambled the combination, and I turned to greet the darkness that painted over the beach. Summer was truly over now. The soundtrack of carnival rides, laughter, and stampeding feet was replaced with the moans of hardwood under my feet. Each step felt like I was disrupting somebody's grave. That was the reality of this place. 4 months out of the year, it's so full of life that it's overwhelming. The rest of its time is spent as a graveyard that is hardly visited. Maybe that's why I never left. If I don't visit, who will? Speaking of visiting, this was the point of my trek home that I saw Bane. They called him that because he was a rather large man, built like a hulking supervillain. In reality, he was as soft as a teddy bear, but unfortunately, homeless. Even from the distance I saw him, which was 2 blocks away, there was no mistaking him. I only ever saw him sparingly. He never stayed in the same place for long and often slept under the boardwalk. I often thought that he was self-conscious of his stature and didn't want to scare people. I could see that he must have been taking in the same swirling twilight sky I'd seen earlier. Now, he was merely entertaining the stars. Looking to my left, I saw that Vincent's Pizzeria was closing up shop. They must have had a better run of business than I did. I slinked over the counter to see a solitary slice looking for a home in the display case. The girl working the counter had her back to me, and as I began to make an attempt for her attention, she screamed.
"Oh my god, you scared me!"
She gasped. Chuckling nervously, I apologized. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to grab that slice before you closed up." I made an honest try at a friendly smile, and she laughed.
Sure. $3.
As she threw the slice in the oven to warm it up, she turned her attention back to me.
"So, any plans tonight?"
I've thought about it, and I really didn't have any. I knew my ritual at this point. Work, and then visit Mix for a drink or two until I've had enough to put me to sleep. I was going to head over to Mix, maybe catch the game for a bit. She grinned.
"I know Mix. Right around the corner, yeah? Maybe I'll stop by. There isn't much else to do on a night like tonight."
I handed her a $5 and signaled her to keep the change. "Maybe I'll see you there," I said half-heartedly, giving one last smile as I departed. She waved, and I focused my attention on the walk ahead. She seemed plenty nice. Might be nice to interact with someone. First, I had something I wanted to do. Bane was right where I last saw him, except now he was gathering his things. I approached him with some haste. "Hey, bud. I haven't seen you in a while." When he turned to see it was me, a smile grew across his face.
"Hey, Mac. Long time."
In my patented, awkward fashion, I continued. "It's been dead out here, huh?" Without looking up, he lamented.
"Sure has. It's that time of year. Certainly not gonna miss it."
Puzzled, I pressed him. "What do you mean?" Once he finished packing his bag, he sighed and his baritone voice continued.
"I need to get some help. I'm gonna go to that place in Summerdale and finally get myself clean."
He sounded so absolute in what he was saying. I couldn't have been happier. "That's great, man. I'd give you a ride myself if I had a car." I chuckled. That really did make my night. He took another deep breath.
"I just need to see her again."
He revealed a small photo in his pocket, presenting it in his large hands. The picture showed a newborn baby girl in the hands of the man in front of me.
"I haven't really seen her since she was born. Once I lost my job and everything just started falling apart."
He trailed off. He shook it off to say,
"I'm just ready. Tonight's my last night. I got my bus ticket ready to go first thing in the morning. I just thought I would take in one last sunset and say goodbye to the others. I saved enough money to get me one night at the Eagle Nest."
I was hard-pressed to find words. I didn't know he had a daughter. It was a lot to take in. But above all, I was so thrilled to hear what he was setting off to do. Remembering what I had in my hands, I spoke up. "Vincent's was closing up, and I thought you could use a bite. Since this is going to be the last time I'll see you, I won't take no for an answer." We both smirked. He reached up for the quickly cooling slice of pizza.
"That's really nice of you, Mac. I appreciate it."
Not sure what else to do, I shot my hand forward to him for a shake. "I really think what you're doing is great. It's been nice knowing you." He reached his enormous paw to mine and shook it.
"You too. I'd say I'd see you again, but I really hope it's not here."
He chuckled as he swung his bag onto his back. I smiled back and waved goodbye. As we made our separate ways, a question occurred to me. "Hey, what's your real name, by the way? Maybe I'll look you up someday to see how you're doing." Without fully turning around, he said,
"It doesn't really matter."
With that, he retreated into the night and left me to wonder what he meant by that. I was soon reaching the block where Mix resides. The pub was right off the boardwalk. The neon lights that illuminated nearby were shining across the face of the mighty King Kong ride. Thankfully, my work and home were all within a short walk of one another. Mix served as the ever so convenient medium between the two. Mix was also where I picked up shifts in the off-season. They must have noticed the frequency with which I visited and decided to offer me a job. It was a solid gig. Mix was one of the few year-round places on the island. Locals gravitated towards it once the summer crowds dissipated. If I was going to spend my time there, I figured I might as well get paid. Just as I was rounding the corner to the off-ramp, something happened. A loose board that hugged the wall greeted my sneaker and sent me tumbling down. All this tourism revenue and this damn boardwalk is still old enough for Medicare. I turned over onto my side to see where my backpack had landed. It was adjacent to the culprit. I groaned as I reached over to grab it, when something caught my eye. Along the wall, hiding just below the wood, I saw what looked like a wasp's nest. It was peeking out from the dark at me, almost as if it was watching me. I peered at it with the light of the pub guiding me. This wasn't a wasp's nest. It was a sickly, pale yellow. Its texture looked wet, almost as if it was hot candle wax burning from a flame. Maybe the fall had disoriented me, but I could swear I saw it moving, rising and falling ever so subtly, like it was breathing. I adjusted my eyes as I leaned in. It wasn't very big, maybe the size of a tennis ball. It was riddled with holes, craters that left very little room for much else. I couldn't help but glare at them. Then it happened. They blinked at me. I jumped back. I pushed myself over the loose board, propping myself up against the concrete. The wood must have knocked whatever it was off the wall. I turned my eyes back to the mass, only to find it was gone, leaving only a trail of faint fluid in one direction, under the boardwalk. Then, only silence. The sound of my rapidly pacing heart was all that was left. What the hell was that? Did it really blink at me? I had to have been seeing things. I just had to. If that was a dead nest, then wasn't it thin and papery? The more I thought of its texture, the more I started to feel nauseous. If there was ever a time I needed a drink, this was it. I began walking in a daze, listlessly on autopilot. Only the buzzing sign above me guided me to my destination, like a moth to a flame. I pushed the bar doors open to find an empty cavern. Only the sound of the reverberating jukebox rang about the building. Hello, it's me, Todd Rundgren. The ghosts around here had good taste. The dim lighting hid the architectural bones of the building. In typical Paradise Point tradition, this was yet another aging wonder. On quiet nights like this one, you might hear the remnants of good times past. Sometimes, it even felt like the seat next to mine was taken, even if nobody was there. For now, it was just me and my echoing footsteps. I hadn't sat for more than what felt like a few seconds before Tommy asked me for my drink. I snapped out of it. What's that?
Your drink, Mac. What would you like to drink?
He said, gesturing in a chugging motion. Oh, just grab me a shot of the usual, please. With that, he made his way to the far end cooler. Blackberry brandy, a local delicacy. Never had it before I moved down here, but it quickly became my drink of choice. If your local watering hole doesn't keep a bottle or two in their Frosty's cooler, don't bother. A warm shot of this might as well be a felony. Tommy poured a heavy hand into the glass in front of me.
It's on me, buddy.
He poured another for himself, and we clinked our glasses.
You alright, man? You look like you've seen a ghost.
That nauseous rot in my stomach returned. The hum of the lights above me seemed to grow louder in sync with my thudding heart. How would I even have begun to explain what I had just seen? Before I could formulate a lie, he had to greet a new bar patron. My eyes followed suit to find that it was a familiar face. There she was. The girl I'd just seen at Vincent's.
Do you come here often?
She said with a faux twang accent, pulling up in the vacated seat next to me. I, reckon, I said coyly, channeling my inner John Wayne.
Looks like we have the place all to ourselves.
She remarked with a grin. Tommy better not leave the register unattended. There must be a whole $50 in there. I quipped. She laughed.
Perfect, just the right amount to start a new life with.
She presented her mixed drink to me for a cheers, only for me to realize that my shot was empty. Suddenly, as if telepathically summoned, Tommy was there pouring into my glass midair. talk about top-notch service. Here's to... I trailed off.
Here's to another summer in the books.
She declared. I nodded my head and followed through with my second dose of medicine. She then continued.
So, are you local year-round?
I shook my head yes and clarified. I haven't always been. This is going to be the second winter I stayed down here. How about you? She then proceeded to explain that she was back in school. Her father owned Vincent's, and she was only helping on weekends until they closed for the year. She was a nursing major, in the thick of her training to become certified. I listened intently. She seemed like she had a plan. And I discovered that we were the same age, 23, yet on completely different avenues in life. She was at least on a road. I haven't been on one for miles.
Enough about me. What are you up to?
A question I was dreading. I answered very plainly, I don't know. After a brief silence, I involuntarily laughed. I'm just trying to figure some things out. It's been a very long couple of years. I think she could see the fatigue on my face.
Do you want to talk about it?
I shook it off. Not particularly. It'll pass. Just a matter of time. I noticed she must have gone home and changed. She was no longer in her generic East Coast Italian pizzeria shirt. She was wearing a faded Rolling Stone shirt under her plaid long sleeve. I saw my opening and quickly changed the subject. Hey, I love that shirt. I work over at Spectre's, actually. We have one just like it. She looked down and declared.
That's hilarious. That's where I stole this from.
We both laughed. It wouldn't surprise me, I remarked. The staff there is terrible. Someone needs to be fired. Our laughter echoed in the empty bar, only now mixing with the sound of a different song. These Eyes by the Guess Who. The ghosts never miss. She continued.
The Stones are my dad's favorite band. He named me Angie after the song.
I liked that. It fit her. My dad loved them too, I concurred. He took me to see them when I was a kid. She smiled.
Sounds like a great dad to me.
I averted my gaze and wanted to change the subject. Then it hit me. Maybe she'd like the album I took home. I began to reach for my bag only to find that it was missing something. The record. My eyes went into the distance, suddenly being brought back to the reality that was my night.
Everything okay?
She inquired. Yeah, I just took an album home tonight and I think I might have left it behind. Then a thought chilled me to the bone. Did it fall out of my bag when I fell on the boardwalk? It was a white album. I would have seen it, right? Unless... Did it slip between the cracks? My mind raced for a moment before she said,
Looks like I'm not the only person on the island with a 5-finger discount at Spectre's.
I snapped out of it and gave a half-hearted chuckle. I looked at my phone. Few missed calls. Few texts I didn't care to answer. It was getting close to 11. I definitely stayed longer than my allotted time at Mix. Besides, I had a girl at home that didn't like to be kept waiting. Daisy, my German Shepherd. She was no doubt worried sick where I was. The thoughts of what I'd seen earlier that night began storming upon what was a good mood. I quickly said, I have to get going. My dog is home waiting for me and she could probably use a quick walk before bed. Angie smiled wide.
I love dogs. Do you think I could meet her?
There was a pause. I didn't know if she meant this very moment or in the near future. Either option didn't feel good to me. It was a nice surprise to meet someone who could distract me from my mind this long. What was the endgame here? This girl was probably better off just leaving whatever this was between us right here at Mix. I'm sure you'll see her. I walk her a lot around here. Maybe if she's good, I'll grab a slice for her this weekend. That was the best I could do. It was better than run as fast as you can. Do you need me to walk you home? She responded.
I'm meeting some of my friends at the point. I was going to call an Uber. It's their last weekend of work here, so they want to celebrate.
Tommy, beginning to close up for the night, spoke up.
I can wait here with her. I'm still cleaning up. I'll see you tomorrow night.
With what I was going to do next on my mind, I began to make my way to exit. Just as I was opening the doors, she shouted.
You never told me your name.
Without turning around or even thinking, I responded, It doesn't really matter. What the hell did I mean by that? Just as I opened the bar doors, I was greeted by a misty air. The air had taken a new quality. This one was thick. Given the frequent temperature fluctuations this time of year, it was no surprise that a storm was on the way. I looked down the corridor of streetlights that resided on Atlantic Avenue, blinking yellow lights, an off-season signature, and the only illuminating sight on this foggy night. There was a slight rumble in the sky. As I made my way, my footsteps on the sidewalk echoed into eternity, each step making me less sure of what I was doing. I made it to the foot of the slope, my shadow growing larger with each step. I peered out to the loose board I had become acquainted with. The fog had passed just long enough for me to see that there was nothing there, just bare naked concrete. I had felt like a child, frightfully staring down a dark hallway after hearing a bump in the night. I scanned the area. No sight of the album. It was around this time that I had noticed it was a full moon. With a storm approaching, that combination would definitely spell for a high tide. If the record was down there, it would be gone by morning. I turned my phone flashlight on and was greeted with more impenetrable fog. By this point, I could feel the kiss of rain above me. The boom of thunder alerted me to make a decision. I took steps forward into the mouth of the boardwalk, searching the sandy floor. Nothing. I turned my attention to the concrete wall. This had to be the spot. No sooner had I turned my attention there, a creak and crawl of sound rang out. Was someone above me? I shined my phone upward and saw nothing but the brilliance of the full moon between the cracks. I took a deep breath and noticed something peeking through the sand to my left. In a shallow grave created by the wind and sand was a white square. I immediately grabbed it. A secret treatise. Finally, I can get the hell out of here. I inspected the LP for damage from the fall to find it was relatively unbothered, except for one thing. As I searched for my coffee stain, I was met with a surprise. The faint brown stain was overlapped by a new color. Black? There was a jet black streak smeared across the plastic sleeve. To my eyes, it was crusted and coarse, like concrete. I held it close to my flashlight, unable to decipher its meaning. Just then, another creak. I frantically shone my light in both directions to find the origin. Nothing. Something did catch my eye. The wall. The clear fluid I had noticed in my early encounter had created a slimy drip down the wall. It led to a burrowing path into the sand. It was as if something had crept in an effort to be undetected. The trail appeared to be thick and deliberate. Using my light, I traced the journey of the fluid to find it created a path to where I'd found the album. It led even further. I took slight steps to discover more. I couldn't stop. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, but my inquisitive feet prevailed. I must have hypnotically walked an entire 2 blocks investigating when I was stopped dead in my tracks. I spotted the edge of a sharp corner sticking out of the sand. I knelt down to investigate. It was a photo. I lifted it high and shook the sand. I knew this picture. It was the snapshot of a father with his newly born daughter in his arms. Bane? I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. In reality, it had only been a few minutes, but the storm had finally arrived. The crash of lightning exploded above me and was chased by thunder. I could see the tide was creeping ever closer, so I had to keep moving. I secured the album and photo into my backpack and started to hastily make my way home. Mixed neon signs had been retired for the night. I kept to the awnings of the hotels that resided on my journey home to stay dry. It was to no avail. As they say, when it rains here, it pours. The streets were already beginning to flood, sweeping away whatever debris lay in its wake. It felt like I was the only man left on Earth, but that wasn't a foreign feeling. At this point, I just wanted to get home to Daisy. That was the only thing that would make sense to me right now. I rounded the corner to my street, turning my brisk walk into a jog to the finish line. Greeting me at the window was the love of my life, pointed ears and alert. She stood tall at the bay window of the house. I don't know who was more excited to see who. She immediately bombarded me with kisses and whined with excitement, not caring that I was drenched from the storm. One perk of working at the record shop is that I'm allowed to close up temporarily to let her out and feed her throughout the shift. You would have thought I was gone for days the way she reacted. Once I peeled out of the wet clothes and changed, I retreated to the living room, using a matchbook from Mix to light some candles in the event of a power outage. The only sound filling this house was the persistent thunder and the ever-wagging tongue of my Daisy. I sat on the couch with her and took a much-needed deep breath. I looked around the house. Everything was still and grounded. They say you can never go home again, but I never fail to feel transported in time when I'm here. Nothing has changed in 15 years. It's almost like walking up to a Polaroid every day. After all, Dad didn't like change, and any disturbing of this place would feel like a tarnishing. He even had a picture I drew when I was 7 on the fridge. It was me with a mighty sword, slaying a giant creature I conjured up from my imagination. I played far too much Zelda for my own good then. It never fails to get a smile out of me when I see it in the morning. I suppose there are worse places to live than in a memory. The silence of this tomb was becoming ear-splitting, and my mind began to wander to places I wished not to visit. I resolved to finish something I had earlier in the evening. I placed the photo of Bane and his daughter on my kitchen table. The weather should be clear in the morning. I would take Daisy for a walk to the Eagle Nest first thing and hopefully return it to him. I looked up the bus schedule, and the first bus was due at 7:15. The album I acquired was next. Now in the bright light of the kitchen, the mysterious dark smear on the protective sleeve still persisted. It must have been a product of the moonlight in which I discovered it. But it was much bigger than I remembered. The color was different. This shade was much more vibrant. I know what you're thinking. How can black be vibrant? I swear it almost seemed to glow. The texture was also amiss. I could have sworn it was dried and solid. The glare of the kitchen light presented a more ink-like substance. Staring at it was making me queasy. The same nauseating feeling I had looking at the imposter wasp nest. Every fiber of my being told me not to touch it. I quickly resolved to just put it in the trash. I had plenty sleeves at work. Just as I was tossing it in the bin and closing it shut, I couldn't help but stare at the blot. For some reason, it felt like staring into an abyss, into true nothingness. It seemed like the stain was peering back, looking right through me. It's too late for this, I thought. I needed a nightcap to put me out for good. I approached the fridge. Planted in the freezer was a bottle of Old Reliable, nestled next door were a few assorted spirits that hadn't been touched since the previous owner was around. Cherry vodka. Maybe I'd change it up. I retrieved some ice cubes and made my way to the living room with the record. Tucked into the corner was a vintage stereo cabinet, a family heirloom. A collection of records resided next door, and I contributed my newest addition. With that, I dropped the needle as the roar of guitars ripped out through the speakers. I sipped my drink and pursued the collection of music. Some of these albums had been here 50 years, dating back to my grandmother. She was a young lady when the world first met Elvis, the king. That was the genesis of the hereditary love for music in my family. I slid an LP out of its crypt, The Flamingos. I haven't pulled this one before. Just as I was inspecting it, I heard a faint bark. I peered down the dark hallway to see the shape of Daisy, seated politely at the door. It was Dad's room. I usually kept it closed. I walked down to meet her, petting the top of her head. I know, baby. I miss him too. I did something out of character and opened the door. Daisy, without missing a beat, found her way to the still-made bed. I sat down next to her and rubbed her belly. I could still feel the bass from the record through the walls. I glanced over to see a closet door cracked open, almost as if it were done on purpose. I opened it to be immediately drawn to a shoebox on the floor. I unearthed it to find it was an archive of ticket stubs. The overwhelming majority were from one place, the Spectrum. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A few included Kiss, December 22nd, 1977. Paul McCartney and Wings, May 14th, 1976. Pink Floyd, June 29th, 1977. Blue Oyster Cult, August 14th, 1975. I spent the next hour shifting through them, only stopping once to flip the record over and refill my drink. The kitchen window was cracked open, and the wild winds of the storm violently blew some loose cooking utensils onto the floor. As I closed it, I could still hear the creaking bones of this old house coming to life. Those noises were practically a lullaby for me at this point. I returned to the room, and just as I was getting too tired to continue, I found the one that eluded me. The Rolling Stones, November 17th, 2006, Atlantic City. I was only 4 years old. Wow. I can vaguely remember bits of it. My main memory of the night was sitting on his shoulders for the majority of the night, feeling larger than life. I've recalled trying to catch the lights from the stage with my hands as they danced in the arena around me. Just as I was in the trenches of that memory, a sudden skip in the music. Just as the record was in the midst of a song I was most intrigued by, A Harvester of Eyes, the antique stereo began to falter. These older models tend to do this, creating an almost hypnotic trance with the music. Returning the ticket stubs, I relieved the vinyl of its duties for the evening. There, I decided to give my grandmother the stage. The opening chords of I Only Have Eyes for You arrived, and I felt at ease. The storm was still strong, lightning seemingly pulsing with the music. I turned the lights down, blew out the candles, and finished my drink. I summoned Daisy to the couch where we comforted each other. The ethereal harmonies of the flamingos lulled us both to sleep, thankful for all we had, even if it was just each other. I was yanked from my slumber by an abrupt sound. My bloodshot eyes opened and I searched my surroundings for the origin. The storm was still raging on, but this wasn't thunder. The stereo was no longer playing. I was shrouded in darkness. The power was out. Reaching for my phone to check the time, only to find it was dead. The startling noise returned, only this time it was a series. I looked at the couch to see Daisy was gone. Did she need to go out? She had a vocabulary of expressions, and this wasn't one of them. She rang out again, desperately for attention. This wasn't a bark. This was a scream. I hurriedly traced it to find her at the border of the dining room and kitchen. She wasn't sat, she was crouched forward, with the fur of her nape standing straight up. I could only make her figure out with each flash of lightning, barking violently, her paws skidding across the hardwood as she backed herself into me. She reached up desperately with her paw and whined into my hands, hiding herself behind my legs. My heart was thudding in my chest with confusion. Crawling out of my throat, I dared to slowly peer around the corner to see the origin of her fear. What I saw next, I can't properly explain. Creeping out of the lid of my trash was an oozing substance, stringy and sticky, like a vine wrapping around a dead tree. It was slowly sprawling across the floor, like veiny webs conquering the land below it. The only identifiable property was the color. It was the same ink color I'd seen on the protective sleeve, now sprawling and humming with a noise I'd never heard before. It sounded like the dissonance of two sour notes on a broken piano, droning with dread. It crept even further, now out of the can and making a direct route to me, raising in pitch like an angry hornet. Daisy's barks were now transformed into yelps, resulting in her skidding into the living room. I was paralyzed, almost as if by design of a predator. I did the only thing that made sense and ran into the living room to retrieve the matchbook. Daisy was huddled in a corner of the room, shaking like a leaf on a tree. I returned to the kitchen to find the substance had covered more tile. Grabbing the bottle of cherry vodka on the counter, I doused the atrocity and lit a match. Still in a momentary state of shock, I could see the ground ick begin to rise in protest as the noise permeating from it was now at a fever pitch. It stood high and spread itself apart, like a blossoming flower of tendons. A sonic scream began to form from within it, rumbling with the thunder outside, nearly blowing the match out. I threw the flame in desperation and watched as it combusted with the fury of hellfire. What followed was an unearthly screech that made my ears bleed. I fell back into the dining room table and broke the chair under me. Daisy ran over to my aid, sat behind me as we both glared in horror at what we were seeing. She howled to the sound, and I covered her ears in protection. I gripped her tight, watching as the flames raged on and the cries died out with the creature. The fire alarm rang out, so I rushed to the pantry in the garage to grab the extinguisher with Daisy in full pursuit. I sprinted to the kitchen to find a harrowing sight. A trail of ash and a clear coat of slime led underneath the back door. Desperately squeezed through the cracks to escape. I opened the door, astonished to find where it led. There was a storm drain in our backyard to help prevent flooding. The nightmarish trail led directly to it, leaving only one possibility of where it fled. It was gone. The steady beep of my fire alarm persisted throughout the kitchen, even with the smoke long gone. I sat, my frozen body against the back door. My stare into the night sky could have stretched 1,000 miles. What do? Do I call the cops? A scientist? A priest? What would I even tell them? Even if I told the truth, they wouldn't believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me. The thoughts overwhelmed me and I could feel my body begin to shut down on me. I looked into the kitchen, replaying the events of the night over and over in my head. Have I finally lost it? I grabbed the bottle of cherry vodka off the counter. There was a shot or two left remaining. Drinking wasn't going to help, but it sure as hell wasn't going to hurt either. I took a look at the damage from my fall in the dining room, which coincided with the throbbing pain in my body. I staggered across the hallway to my room and collapsed in my bed with Daisy. An involuntary wave of sleep began crashing down on me. Maybe this was a dream within a dream, and I would wake up on the couch where this nightmare began. I woke up to my face being licked, praying to God it was Daisy. I opened my eyes to find that it was indeed her. The morning light shone through on both of us, an unwelcome sight for sore eyes. This was worse than any hangover I'd ever had. This felt like a car wreck. The bruises on my leg and back served as a painful reminder. Last night was very real. At least the power was back. That was a win. I realized that in the midst of the chaos that was last night, my phone never charged, and I most likely missed my alarm. As I hooked my phone to charge, I eagerly waited to find out the time was 8:43. Jesus Christ, I missed the bus. I looked at the snapshot on the table and decided that I could still go to the hotel. Maybe he checked in with his real name and I could mail this picture to the clinic in Summerdale. I hurried out the door, leaving my phone behind to power up. The storm last night left Paradise Point a chilly, damp wasteland. Wet leaves tumbled about the street set to an overcast sky. I hadn't even taken the time to remember that Halloween was around the corner. Despite the many vacated homes, there was a scattering of decorations on my way to the eagle nest. Daisy stopped to sniff some pumpkins and barked at a neighbor's scarecrow. If it didn't feel like I was already living through a horror film, I would have enjoyed the sights more. Even though it was only us, I couldn't help but feel like we weren't alone. The cascading falls of excess rain into every sidewalk gutter made my palms sweat. We arrived at the hotel to find an older woman sitting at the front desk. She was reading an old paperback romance novel and hardly paid us any mind. Excuse me, were you working the desk overnight? Turning the page without looking up, she sighed.
What does it look like?
Ignoring that, I retrieved the photo from my pocket to show her. Did you happen to see this man? Refusing to pay any mind to the picture, she flatly said,
No.
Losing all patience, I slammed my hand on the desk, rattling her thick rimmed glasses almost off her face. Look, lady, I've had a very long night. I need to find this man. He was supposed to check in here last night. Did you or did you not fucking see him? She was astonished, as was I. What is happening to me?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry, sir.
She trembled. Okay, maybe her shift started after he came in? I asked if I could see the check-in log from last night. She grabbed the clipboard and handed it over shakily. Not a single check-in. My stomach dropped. He never made it here. I could feel my pulse rising as we made our way outside. I stood at the corner with Daisy, feeling uneasy about what my next move might have to be. The eagle nest was only 1 block away from the beach. Bane said he left to say goodbye to the others. Did he go under the boardwalk? It was a rainy night. Sometimes the homeless will sleep down there to stay dry or even burn a bonfire to stay warm this year. My body was screaming internally to turn back around, but I knew where I had to go next. I needed answers. I found my feet at the base of the boardwalk, pointed toward the unknown. Swaying off the ocean into town was a parade of mist, a mere memory of last night's storm. If I was going to get any answers, I needed to find Bane. Best place to start would be to trace my steps. I gripped Daisy's leash tight and began my journey. The record shop was still shuttered. Mr. Doyle, the owner, would be in later today to open up shop. Business had been so quiet lately. He had to let me know he'd been in town to prepare closing down for the winter. Gazing at the shop in its current state made me long for boring nights listening to random records. That world, as I knew it, felt like a distant memory. The attractions and shops that were shrouded in shadows were now exposed. Somehow, their presence in this light wasn't any less unsettling. Despite their catatonic state, even horses on the merry-go-round felt like they were monitoring us. There was not a soul in sight, save for one man I spotted unlocking an equipment shed. I peeked inside as I made my way, rows of vendor carts and propane tanks. He must have been one of the few holdouts hanging on until the end. Soon after, I passed Vincent's. Lost in all this was the fact that I abruptly left Angie at the bar. I didn't have room in my brain at the moment to process that guilt. With any luck, it was enough to scare her away. Whatever this was that I was getting myself into, she was better off. My walk had already reached as far as I remember seeing Bane. I looked around me. Every shop was still under lockdown. The only landmark of note from this point on was the pier. This was the general area where I found the picture beneath me. I looked up at our town's landmark attraction, the Ferris wheel. Inactive, the gale winds rocked the carriages with a foreboding groan. I could see the apprehension in Daisy's eyes. It was time to go under. Making our way down, I looked to my right. Back the way I came was a repeating corridor of pillars and wood into a void. To my left was a similar sight, but ended at a concrete wall. Heading in that direction was the familiar sight in the sand. The burrowing trail I had seen last night was still there. Even with the still present high tide swallowing the sands around us, it still persisted. The trail was different. It looked like it was splintered and scattered through the ground in one direction. I knew what this looked like. I had seen the same pattern on my kitchen floor last night. Looking even further around me, my blood ran cold. It wasn't just one set. There was multiple. As I followed the path to the pier wall, I noticed each passing pillar had residue of the slime that violated my home. I rushed out from under the boards and vomited into the sand. The wind was whipping now. Sand pellets smacked my face as I struggled to catch my breath. I reassured Daisy I was okay, but we both knew I was anything but. I trembled as we began to make our way to the pier. The biggest difference between the pier and the boardwalk was structure. Under the pier was much lower to the ground, and due to the numerous rides and attractions above, there was no light shining through the cracks. Turbine winds were howling underneath, creating a similar drone to the ungodly one I heard last night. I could also see the tide was washing up below as waves crashed around us. It was just then I could hear a faint growl. I looked down to see Daisy was sat politely to my side, but her face was stern. Suddenly, she leaned forward to bark. It echoed throughout the empty space, only to be followed by more. She was pulling me towards the darkness now. I held with all my strength, but her primal instincts were stronger. Her barks became a mess of growls and spit as she showed her teeth to the abyss. Before I knew it, she yanked me to the sand as I failed to grab her. She was gone. Crouching forward, I pursued into the darkness. I followed the sounds of her barks, calling her name out desperately. The only illuminating light I had was the open ocean to my right, which was flooding my shoes. To my left was pure oblivion. Daisy's barks had led me deep into the bowels of the pier when suddenly they stopped. The only noise now was my rapid breaths and the howl of the wind. I called out for her only to hear nothing in response. My voice cracked as I called again. Dead silence. Tears began to fill my eyes. Panic was flooding my body. Suddenly, a thudding, far away but fast approaching. I scanned my surroundings, unable to locate it. It was faster now. Each boom shook my heart. Shaking, I began to brace myself when I was pummeled into the sand. I felt the same warm kisses that awoke me this morning. It was Daisy. Thank God. Grabbing her ears and seeing her eyes lock into mine, relief washed over me as the tide followed suit. My body's defense mechanism took the wheel as I began to laugh until I realized something. Daisy had dropped something foreign off at my feet. It was an empty backpack. The very same empty backpack I saw swung over the broad shoulders of the man I was searching for. A reality began creeping upon me. If I did find Bane, it's not going to be pleasant. Something was very wrong here, and we were somehow in the middle of it. With Daisy by my side, I pressed on, letting her lead the way. Sticking as close as we could to the water for light, I searched every inch of the pier for any more clues. Just ahead were rocks that hugged the shoreline. As I focused on the waves that were crashing into them, I saw something. It looked to be a body laid across the rocks, still under the cover of the pier. Beginning to run, we came to find something much more horrifying. What I'm about to write next, I'm gonna have a hard time getting through. This was a body, but it was mutilated beyond resembling anything human. The skin was almost gone, seemingly torn off the body like wrapping paper. Any remainder on the body was covered underneath in varicose veins that were unmistakably black. The body's ribs were exposed and hollowed out like a jack-o'-lantern. Below them was a floating pool of half-devoured organs. It looked like a body that was eaten from the inside out. The mouth was open in sheer terror, stretched wide to let out a scream that nobody would hear. The areas surrounding the mouth were stained with that jet black color I've become all too familiar with. Inside the mouth was a set of incomplete and shattered teeth. Leading from the neck up was a series of black, bloody tear trails. They led to a pair of eyes that were no longer there. The only discernible feature was the bald head that held those eyes. The head on the body of a large man who I called my friend. I stood in frozen terror, my mouth and eyes wider than the ocean beside me. Bane! The ticking hands of the office clock paced their way around the track. Given the fact that my phone was still at the house, this was the only concept of time I had. We sat for hours, waiting for Sheriff Castle to return. His office was no more than a holding cell for us. Daisy napped on the floor as my leg bounced restlessly. Suddenly, the door swung open and there he was, carrying 2 bowls of water and kibble for my girl.
I know you two have been waiting some time, Mr. Grimbridge. I'm sure she could use this.
Thank you. So do you
I
have—
found your friend, or what was left of him, that is. I just returned from the coroner's office and we tracked down some family to come identify the body. It's an unfortunate situation. A damn shame. I'm sure that was terrible to find.
Before I could even formulate a response, he continued.
Looks like the coroner is leaning towards accidental death, maybe even death by misadventure. Given where he was found and his previous visits here for drunk and disorderly, we think he might have fallen off the pier into the rocks below.
Astonished, I stood up. That's impossible. I saw him last night. He was going to Summerdale to get clean. He was sober as a stone. The sheriff raised his hand to request that I sit down. After a beat, he continued.
I'm sure he was. He also told me that he mentioned saying goodbye to the others. We don't have a toxicology report yet, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. He could have decided he wanted one last hurrah with his friends.
Shaking my head, I blurted, "How do you explain what happened to his body? A fall onto the rocks isn't doing that. There's no way."
Mac, his body was down there for hours. I've seen vultures do worse than roadkill on the street. We had a nasty storm last night that brought tides high enough to cause flooding. He was most likely in the water for a long time, and there's a million things in those waters that could have done some damage. You'd be shocked at what washes up on these shores after a storm like that.
I sat in silence. I still hadn't told him about what happened in my kitchen last night. I struggled with the words to explain it the entire time he was gone. Now, I knew for sure he wouldn't believe me.
Accidents happen, right? You of all people should understand that. This should be a wake-up call for you, Mac. I know he was your friend, but that could be you someday.
Stunned, I stared at him. I was ashamed of what he was alluding to.
I know losing your dad was hard. I knew him. Hell, I tied off a few with Lee and Mix back in the day. I just don't want to see you go down the same path. It was awful having to respond to that call and see it was you.
I closed my eyes. I didn't want to think about this. But here I was. Last year, months after my dad died, I had a terrible moment. I had a few too many at Mix and some more when I went home. I couldn't stand the silence of being alone in that house another minute. I got in my car like an idiot and tried to drive back to my mom's. I was out of my mind. I ended up wrapping my car around the tree in town. Thank God no one else was hurt. The possibility that I could have hurt someone else is what still eats at me. Between you and me, I still don't know if I did it on purpose or not. Sometimes I wake up out of a dead sleep thinking I'm still in the wreck. I look down to see Daisy staring back up at me. I'm glad I wasn't successful. She didn't deserve that. I took a deep breath. Sheriff, I think there's something very wrong happening here. He reciprocated my inhale and crossed his hands, choosing his next words carefully. He had an unsettlingly serious look on his face.
Mac, I'm gonna give you some advice and I strongly suggest you take it. There are things you don't understand in this world, and sometimes you have to let those things run their course. That's nature, son. Survival. And if you can't survive, you'll soon be extinct. I think it would be in everybody's best interest if you get out of Paradise Point for a while.
He grabbed his jacket with those final words and escorted us out of the office. I turned around before he closed the door and asked one last question. I just need to know one thing. You contacted his family, right? What was his real name?
It doesn't really matter.
With that, he slammed the door shut. When we got home, the silence of this empty house forced me to confront Castle's words. I did something I thought I'd never do. I picked up my phone and called someone who's been trying to reach me for months. My mom. The sheriff was right. I'm in way above my head. I couldn't help but keep looking at Daisy. I can't put her or myself in any more danger. I don't know what Castle knows what I know. At this point, I don't care anymore. The thing under the boardwalk was his problem, not mine. I had my own monster to deal with. The astonishment in my mom's voice when I called was incredible. I didn't realize how much I'd alienated myself from her. I forgot how good it was to hear her voice.
Are you sure, Michael? I can be there in a few hours.
It had been so long since I'd heard from her, I almost forgotten my proper name. It almost felt like she was talking about a complete stranger. Yes, I think it's time. The haste in which she hung up the phone could be felt through the receiver. I swear I could hear her car keys rattling. I wasted no time packing up. I couldn't very well take the stereo with me, so I decided to give one last album a spin. The Slider by T-Rex. Nothing like a little glam rock to lighten the mood. I think I could even sense the wag in Daisy's tail as a sign she was also ready to leave. There wasn't much I could take with me, and I wasn't sure if I was ever coming back. I'd be leaving this place almost exactly as I found it, and maybe that was for the best. Just as my favorite song on the album, Ballroom on Mars, was playing, I couldn't help but notice an ironic line. There are things in night that are better not to behold. You said a mouthful, Mr. Bullen. The sun was in its early stages of setting, and I did not want to be around for whatever tonight had to offer. Then something happened. Just as I finished packing, I went to grab a bite to eat from the fridge. The picture I drew as a kid was hanging on the front, and I took it down, weighing if I should bring it with me. That kid was certainly braver than I was now. It reminded me of what was in my pocket. I pulled out the snapshot photo of Bane and his daughter and held it side by side with my drawing. The urgency I was feeling to leave was now beginning to turn. That poor girl will never know him. He didn't get the chance he deserved to make things right. How I wished I could go back and tell him to get as far away from the boardwalk as possible when I had the chance. Then some anger started to slowly fill me. Bane wasn't just some nameless casualty to alcoholism. Letting his daughter and everybody else think that made my teeth clench. I knew what it was like to have those eyes on you when people think they know you and your family. I know what I saw, and every fiber of my being knew that what the sheriff was telling me was bullshit. It was around this time I could hear my mom's car pull up. I had to make a decision. I went out and greeted her with a long hug. I could practically feel her tears on my shoulders.
Are you ready?
I could feel it in my gut. This is the part in scary movies when you're screaming at the character to get out of the house. Actually, the guys over at Mick wanted to throw a little get-together for my last night. Tommy said he'd give me a lift back to your place tomorrow afternoon. Would you mind just taking Daisy for tonight? Puzzled, she nodded yes, but didn't look convinced.
Michael, are you sure?
Almost as if she knew exactly what I was going to do. I sighed. Yeah, it wouldn't feel right leaving without saying goodbye first. I'll be home sometime before noon. I smiled as I hugged her again, her face still pensive and unsure. I promise, really. I just need to do this one last thing. I gave Daisy one last kiss on her head and she settled into the front seat of the car. I'll see you again real soon, baby. I promise. With that, I gave my mom a wave goodbye as she drove off. I could feel a big part of my heart breaking. This might be the last time I ever see them. Daisy's eyes locked onto mine until the car was out of sight. I stared from my backyard to the tangerine-colored skies. It would be night soon. One of the perks of living here year-round is that I'm one of the only people left on my block. With what I was planning on doing tonight, I needed to arm myself. The Mackenzies next door had a tool shed that was almost half the size of my house. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I was certain it would be in there. Thankfully, they were in Florida for the winter, and they asked me to check on their place, so I knew where their spare keys were. All I knew about this thing is that fire hurt it, but didn't kill it. Maybe the key to all this was what I encountered when that fateful fall took place last night. The pit in my stomach returned as I thought about it again. That nest. I shuddered to think that maybe I was right about what it appeared to be, but not the horror of what that meant. Their shed was loaded with garden and construction equipment. Mr. Mackenzie was quite the handyman. An axe gleamed in the light of the shed. Might not kill it, but I'm sure it would slow it down. I stowed it away in my bag as another item caught my eye. A small, handheld grill torch sat on the table with a full tank of propane attached. I had seen Mr. Mackenzie use it to show off at cookouts. A plan was starting to formulate. I returned home to pack my bag for the night. This time, there was no music. I was gonna have to make a stop at Mick's after Tommy closed down for the night. I looked at my phone to see a text. My mom had sent me a picture of her and Daisy, safe and sound. I could feel a tear in my eye as I texted her, "I love you." I scrolled to the very bottom of my messages to see the last in line, the last conversation I had with my dad. "I'll be there in a few hours. You want some takeout? My treat." It doesn't really matter. It was just then I heard a sudden knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anybody and certainly didn't want any company at this point. The knocking continued. I tried to peek out around the door to get a glimpse. It was nightfall now, and I couldn't make the shape of whoever or whatever it was out. Finally, I swung the door open to see a shocking sight. "Angie? Angie? What are you doing here?" She asked if she could come in, and I obliged. She took a second to think over her words and turned around.
Tommy gave me your address. Something seemed really off last night when you were leaving, and I just wanted to check up on you.
I felt like I needed to make up any lie I could to get her out of here, but I couldn't help feel disarmed by her presence. "I'm okay. The album I was telling you about, it fell out of my bag and I wanted to go back and get it before the storm hit," I explained.
That's not what I'm talking about.
She replied,
You just seem like you're struggling with something. I could see it in your eyes the entire time. Tommy told me about your dad after you left.
I shook my head. Of course he did. "I'm fine, I promise," I said, laughing. I don't know who I was trying to convince. She asked if we could sit down on the couch, and I followed her. She seemed very sullen, not the same lively girl I had met last night. The bright eyes I'd gotten acquainted with now had a cloudier tone.
You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I just wanted to tell you that you're not alone, even if you feel like you are. I know what it's like to lose somebody, and I still deal with it every single day.
Wringing her hands, she continued.
I lost my little sister 5 years ago.
I told her how sorry I was. She shook it off and took a look around the house.
This is a pretty big place for just one guy, don't you think?
She observed. Yeah, this used to be my grandmother's. She left it to my dad, and he moved down here after the divorce. When he passed, it went to my mom and I.
That would explain the antique furniture.
She jabbed jokingly, looking at an old wooden cabinet of pictures. I think it adds to the charm, don't you? She nodded and continued to scan the living room when the record player caught her eye. She got up to check it out when she noticed the collection of albums.
So, are you going to play the record that was more important than hanging out with me last night?
I got up to find it. Looking at the cover, it made me freeze in place. I was getting distracted from what I needed to do tonight. I glanced over to my bag to make sure it wasn't in plain sight. I couldn't have Angie questioning what I was doing with an axe. I decided that it was still too early for Mix to have been closed. I couldn't act suspicious and chance Angie finding out what I was up to. My best bet was to play it cool and send her on her way. I placed the needle on side 2 where I left off, and we returned to the couch. We listened for a while, and she remarked that I had good taste. I thanked her and said I got it from my dad.
What was he like?
She asked. He was great. He was my best friend. My only friend. For a while. It was like we were the same person. She smiled and encouraged me to go on. We did everything together. We were inseparable. He used to always say from the moment I was born, everything just clicked. It was effortless, you know? I never tried too hard. It all just came naturally. We bonded over everything. He was like a superhero to me. I started to get a little choked up. I hadn't talked about my dad like this since the funeral. Maybe it was the weight of the world I'd been feeling crashing down on me. Maybe there was something about Angie I instinctively trusted. It all just poured out of me at that moment. When my parents divorced, things really changed. It didn't happen overnight, but he was never the same. He stopped being my dad. When he moved down here, the drinking started, and it wasn't long before he was unrecognizable. I think the pain of losing my mom was too much for him. His drinking pushed me away, and I stopped coming to see him as much. I stopped to catch my breath. I was speaking so fast, I forgot to breathe. I slowed myself down and regained my composure. I came down during winter break from school to spend Christmas with him. When I came in, he was passed out on that recliner, listening to music. I should have known something was wrong. Daisy was whining the moment I walked in the door. I stopped the music and went to cover him with a blanket when I noticed he wasn't snoring like he usually does. He wasn't breathing at all. I couldn't go on, and I stared at the chair for a moment. It was like he was still there. Nothing about this room had changed since that night. I've been reliving every single day without realizing it, like I never left. They said it was alcohol poisoning, but it felt like my dad died long before that. I lamented. Angie brought me in for a hug. I could feel the tears squeezing out of my eyes.
It's okay,
she whispered. Holding me in her arms, she stared off and broke through the sounds of music.
Ruby was my whole world. She was such a ray of sunshine. It was impossible to feel sad around her. She wanted me to take her sledding after the blizzard we got about 5 years ago. We had so much fun. It was just the two of us. I felt like a kid again.
She got quiet, almost as if she was living through it again right there in my arms.
The last thing I remember was her singing in the car with me, and then waking up in the hospital. We hit a patch of black ice on the drive home. I lost control and we hit a tree head on.
My heart was thudding like thunder, almost breaking completely. Then she said something that shook my very being.
Some nights, I wake up and it's like I'm still in the wreck. Time may pass, but it doesn't mean it takes you with it. That's the thing about depression. It's like quicksand. You're stuck in place, slowly being consumed, and you don't even know it. That's what it wants. It's inside all of us, just biding its time before it can swallow us whole.
We sat in silence. Those words hit me hard. Then a question dawned on her as she got up to look at me.
You said you had a dog. Where is she?
I was so deep in this moment. I had almost forgotten Daisy was with my mom. I made a promise to her that I would be back. Maybe it wasn't too late to turn around. Oh, I actually had my mom pick her up. I think I'm gonna leave Paradise Point for a while. I just needed to do something before I left, I confessed. She looked puzzled.
Really? What was that?
There was no way I could tell her the truth. I was at a crossroads, but I knew what I needed to do. For now, I didn't see the harm in spending what could be my last hours with her. Maybe I needed to see that girl who works at the counter at Vincent's before I left. I quipped. I felt something pulling me down. It was her. She brought me in for a kiss that felt like the first warm day after months of winter. She asked what record my dad was listening to, nodding towards the stereo cabinet. I had to think about it. It was by Band on the Run, by Wings. Paul was always his favorite Beatle. As a matter of fact, that was the very room where my grandfather and father watched the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. My dad always said that was a moment that changed his life forever. Ironically, the song that was playing was the second to last, Picasso's Last Words. That always stuck with me. It was a shame he didn't at least make it to the end.
What do you say we finish it for him?
She suggested. It made me smile. We were nearing the end of Secret Treaties, and she asked if she could use the bathroom. I pointed her in the right direction and decided to find the album. Once I found it, I heard her voice in the distance.
Mac, I think there's something wrong with your sink.
Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" She replied,
There's nothing coming out. It keeps shaking when I turn the faucet.
I made my way across the living room. I started to get that pit in my stomach again. Don't touch anything, Angie. I'll be right there, I commanded.
Mac, can you...
Her voice was starting to tremble as I began to rush to the door. I swung the door open to see her staring at the mirror. Her hands were crooked and frozen, her eyes wide and fixed upon them. Her fingers were darkly stained and shaking. She began to turn to me, pleading for help. The color sent a jolt of terror throughout my body. Black! Just as she was about to say something, she gasped. Suddenly, the stains absorbed into her skin like a sponge. She shook violently, and her wide eyes locked onto mine, looking for answers. It was then she began to cough. It was quiet, but then became a gag. She collapsed to the tiles, gasping for air as I reached down to catch her. Just before my eyes, one of her teeth fell out onto my lap. Then another. Her cries began ringing throughout the room as she desperately grabbed for them. A darkness began bleeding through the vacated gums in her mouth, smearing her face. I released her and stood frozen as I watched her crawl towards the toilet. She looked back at me, and her eyes began to ooze the same substance through her tear ducts. Her whimpers were now screams as I watched her eyes begin to roll to the back of her head, the white now consumed with black. They bulged as they melted from inside of her head, painting her face as she clawed at it. I fell back into the door and slowly began to crawl back as I watched her body convulse. Her veins began to pulsate. I could practically see them through her skin as the darkness invaded her bloodstream. Her fingernails slid off, making way for the same stringy mess of black tendons I saw last night. Soon, they broke through the several areas of her body, ripping her skin apart. Suddenly, her screaming stopped. A new noise came from her mouth, and it didn't belong to her. Her limp head slowly twisted towards me as her body began to slowly stagger upwards. I skidded across the floor and slammed the door shut. I ran across the living room to hide behind the couch, grabbing the axe and grill torch. I needed something flammable. It was dead silent when the sudden start of the final song, Astronomy, made me jump. I could hear the quiet turning of my bathroom knob creak throughout the house. I peeked my head above to see only the light of the bathroom against the wall and the unholy silhouette that occupied it. I watched those black webs stick to the hardwood floor, dragging Angie's lifeless feet forward. She was unrecognizable, practically being worn as a suit. The same dissonant sound droned from within her as it crept its way through the shadows of my hallway. It made its way to the light switch, turning to my exact location as if it knew where I was. It widened Angie's decimated mouth into the twisted form of a smile as it killed the lights. I turned back down behind the couch, trying to quiet my rapid breath. My heart was beating faster than the crescendoing music beside me. I gripped my axe and waited. I needed to buy time and slow it down. I leaned in and focused on the sound that was buzzing from her body as it drew closer. My adrenaline was at an all-time high as I could hear the wet suction on the floor beside me. I jumped out from behind the couch to meet the atrocity, screaming as I swung my axe. The element of surprise was on my side. I took wild swings at the thighs like a demented lumberjack. The legs separated from what used to be a body as it collapsed to the floor. I took my chance and ran like hell with the torch and axe. I made it to the bathroom to find a large can of Lysol spray in the cabinet. I looked around the corner to see the thing had sprouted more black tendrils from where I amputated the leg. It stood tall, staring down its prey. It let out a screech through Angie's mouth as I sprinted down the hallway. I opened the basement door deliberately and then hid in the adjacent closet down the hall, leaving only a crack. Just then, the music began to rap into a crawling halt. I could almost hear its appendages sticking to the vinyl. Now, the only sound that filled the house was the creaks of hardwood floor accompanied by the thick thuds of Angie's body being dragged down the hallway. I quieted my breathing and waited. My hands were shaking on the axe as the thing drew nearer. Just as it finally made it to the basement opening, I sprung from the closet and buried the axe into its head, practically splitting it down the middle. Black blood began to drip down its face as it turned to roar at me with such ferocity that I flew back into the closet. I scrambled to grab the spray and torch as a fireball exploded from my hands, engulfing the body in flames. With both feet, I kicked as hard as I could, sending it tumbling down the basement stairs. I slammed the door shut and held my body against it. All I could hear was the muffled cries of the beast and the crackling of flames. There was no way out down there. No windows, no vents. Only this door. I needed to barricade it. I ran to the living room and pushed the antique wooden cabinet and the family photos onto the floor, shattering the years of memories in the process. I pushed with all my might as fast as I could, propping it against the door and handle. I held my body weight against it. The muffled screeches began to rip through the walls as I held my ears. I could hear the slight thud of something climbing up the stairs, one step at a time. I armed myself again. I wouldn't stop until this thing was ash. Just as I was at my most tense, I could hear the crash of the burnt carcass hit the basement floor. It was quiet now. I wasn't taking any chances. I hurriedly grabbed every piece of furniture I could and stacked it against the door. I then collapsed onto the floor, out of breath. I knew this wasn't the end. I hurried as I grabbed my bag. The axe was in the basement with Angie's body, and I couldn't chance going down there. I was met with the brisk and howling wind outside as it began to rush down the street. My phone's clock read just past midnight. Tommy usually gave us a call at 11 or so. Mix was attached to a motel, owned by the same family. He was most likely working the desk overnight, so I needed to be careful. I rounded the corner and crept in the shadows of the building to see Tommy at the desk typing away at his laptop. He always said he was going to write a book about this place. I made my way down the alley where we threw the trash out. The back door to the kitchen had an electric padlock since the keys kept going missing. I punched the combo in from memory and quietly made my way in. Thankfully, Tommy kept the jukebox on. He didn't like how quiet things got overnight, and he enjoyed hearing the music from the front desk. He always joked that it was for the ghosts, and I started to think that maybe he wasn't kidding. All I could hear was some indistinct song by the Carpenters echoing throughout, and that certainly wasn't his taste. The kitchen was dark, so I had to use my phone's flashlight as I searched for a bag of bar rags. Once I found them and stuffed a few into my bag, I peered out into the desolate bar. The room was only lit by the still playing jukebox. Behind the bar was an aluminum bat. Tommy insisted on keeping it there in case of an emergency, but tonight it belonged to me. I grabbed the liquor room keys hanging above the register and quietly stuck my way to the back room. I searched for any spirits higher than 100 proof, but we only had one. In the very back sat a bottle of Everclear. It wasn't ideal, but I would have to make it count. I kept looking out every few seconds to make sure I didn't alert Tommy. I spent many nights closing alone here, and you never felt like you were the only one in the room. I took one last look at the bar before I left. The jukebox began to cut out and its lights flickered. A new song began, and it was a familiar one. It was the final song of the album my dad never finished, 1985. All those nights I spent here alone. Maybe there was somebody sitting in that empty seat after all. I stood at the mouth of the boardwalk, gazing into the void that laid ahead. The only light was provided by the full moon, which shone through the cracks above. I retrieved the heavy-duty gloves I stole from the Mackenzie's shed and gripped the baseball bat tight. The Lysol spray and torch were positioned in the outer pockets of the bag on my back like gun holsters. I traversed the sandy floor. waving my light down the hall of pillars. I could hear the boardwalk moaning above me as if it were gasping its final breaths. I needed to find that nest and put an end to this. These patterns in the ground below me would lead me right to it. I was certain. If nothing else, I was what it wanted, and I was ready for it to come get me. Just as I was making my way to the pier, suddenly, there was a noise. It echoed out from behind me as I shone my light in its direction. All I could see was the concrete structure standing still as a tomb, but one had something dark wrapped around it. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Bathed in the moonlight was a nightmarish sight. Angie, or what used to be Angie. She was in a charred state of complete decay from what I could see, practically falling apart with each step. I turned to hide behind the pillar next to me, stowing the baseball bat away and arming myself with a makeshift flamethrower. My breaths were sharp and uncontrollable as I could feel its presence. I peeked around the corner to see the next move. Her body stopped moving and began to convulse. The black tendrils that had been using her body began to excavate her into the sand, leaving her a hollowed husk on the ground. I aimed my weapon at the sand as a furious burrow began to form. Just as it reached me and my heart was set to explode, it rushed right by me. I stared out to where it went and could see where it was leading. The pier. I began to run after it, following the freshly made path. I ducked under the low-hanging ceiling and scanned the area. There was nothing now, just undisturbed sand. Where did it go? I began to search wildly around me. Sounds I hadn't heard before began to ring out the cavern. As I searched, I suddenly couldn't move. I tripped and fell, losing my torch in the sand in front. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and shone the flashlight to my feet to find they were covered in a clear slime that blended into the sand. There were puddles of it all around me. This was a trap, like a fly in a spider's web. I was stuck. I could feel my legs slowly giving way into the sand, my hands dragging along the soft ground. It was then I heard yet another sound, a wet squelch. I desperately flashed my light around the pier to find its source. At the very end of the pier, painted into the corner, was a mass. This was a fleshy sack that sprawled out along the ceiling, taking up more than a quarter of the size of the boards above it. I swung my back off and in front, reaching for the bat for leverage. I kicked my legs and momentarily stopped my descent, stabbing the handle of the bat into the dry sand ahead until it was firm. I pulled my feet slightly forward. I looked up to the mass to see something that made my blood run cold. 100 dark craters, wide and deep. They were pulsating with malice. Then it happened. They blinked at me. I furiously began pulling my legs up, finally freeing them from the sand. My shoes were hardening like concrete. I scrambled to take them off and grab my torch when I heard a loud boom. I flashed my light to the ceiling to see the nest was gone. That horrible noise was back. The sour buzzing that had been violating my ears. In the near distance, something began to rise. Endless black arms began to reach the ceiling in columns, sprawling out in the sand. At the epicenter was the nest. It was triple the size of when I last saw it. It was stretched out wide, with each of its holes spitting out more dark tendrils. A scream began to crescendo inside of it as it killed the light and grabbed my torch from the sand. I swung my bag over my shoulders and ran towards the ocean, feeling the ground below me quake. I looked back to see it was gone. My bare feet sprinted only to be halted by a black arm that exploded from the sand in front of me. It plastered to the boards above me. As another did the same a few yards away, I zigzagged between them as I neared the exit. A maze began to form as they got ever so closer to catching me. Just as I made it into the clearing, I threw my bag over top and climbed the bed of rocks, barefoot. A flooding of dark stringy webs began to consume the rocks towards me. I used the last of the Lysol spray to create a trail of flames with my torch. The burnt mess retreated back into the abyss. I could feel the rage permeating from the earth below me as it roared. Leaping as high as I could, I climbed on top of the guardrails to safety. Backing from the clearing, armed with my bat, my eyes frantically searched for any sign of the monster. Silence filled the space around me, only interrupted by the sounds of my bare feet backing away. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't slow my heart rate down as my hands trembled on the bat. Spotting my next destination, my blistering feet quietly crept towards the equipment shed near the Ferris wheel. The bottom of my bat swung furiously at the lock, every whack making my heart skip a beat. I scanned the labyrinth of rides and games. No sign of it in sight. The padlock fell towards the boards when suddenly my feet felt a wave of hot, thick air. My body froze. I peered down to see every crack of the boardwalk below my feet filled with the blinking craters. A number of black appendages broke through the cracks to block me. The bat swung with purpose as it collided with the arms, splattering them across the wall of the shed. My bat struck them as they fell lifeless to the ground. A clearing formed, and I took off around the corner of the shed as the monster squealed in pain. As it retreated below, I ran to the circuit box across the pier. I hid behind it as the monstrosity lifted itself up through the hole it created, crawling like an arachnid. It hunted for my scent as I threw one of the switches above me. The water gun game lit up. Its blaring music jarred the creature. I needed it to move further away, so I flipped another. The horse carousel at the entrance came to life, its motion eliciting an attacking response. I made my way to the shed as fast as I could, retrieving my bag as I frantically ran inside, twisting every knob possible open. The hiss of propane created a high-pitched symphony only to be overpowered by the frustrated bellowing of the beast. I was out of time. I could hear the thunderous thuds in the near distance making their way back. I took my phone out and set a timer for 3 minutes and set it on the floor. I peeked out to see it wasn't back yet. Making a move, my feet swiftly rounded the corner, my body painted to the wall as I inched my way across. By the time I made it to the back, I could see the behemoth was on the prowl. I leaned down as it came closer, retrieving the contents of my bag quietly. I doused the bar rag with the bottle of grain alcohol as I stuffed it inside. I kept counting in my head. I had just passed 2 minutes. As I was finishing, the bottle slipped from my hands. The monster shot a look in my direction, crouching as its webbed arms and legs drug it across the floor. Turning away, I kept counting. That ungodly hum was drawing closer, vibrating the ground below me as tears began to well in my eyes. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Biting my lip, closing my eyes, holding my breath, the bottle and torch ready in each hand. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The alarm buzzed out, and I could hear the crashing bangs of the monster attacking the sound. Running faster than I ever had before in my life, I ran out in front and turned to face my demon. I lit the wick of my bomb as the creature frantically turned to see that its prey had the upper hand. It shrieked and wailed as I threw it with all my might. I darted across the pier, getting as close as I could to the clearing. I could feel the wind of the explosion at my back as it detonated, sending a sonic boom throughout Paradise Point. My feet lifted off the ground as I flew forward. I rolled to the edge of the pier as my body fell free to the rocks below. Once I came to, the visage of our town's Ferris wheel in flames greeted my eyes. My body ached with resonating pains. I dragged myself up to begin making my way home. I limped as fast as I could and kept to the shadows below the boardwalk until I reached my next destination. Tommy was outside Mix, smoking a cigarette as he gazed astonished at the burning wheel in the sky. I snuck into the motel office and stole his laptop. He'll have to forgive me later. Sirens began to ring out around me as I kept to the backyards and alleyways before I finally made it home. I staggered across the front door, hardly astonished at the wreckage of this house. I reached into the freezer for a bottle of blackberry brandy. Somehow, I managed to get through this night sober, but that was all about to change. I looked down the hall to see the destruction of my basement door and the furniture I used to barricade it. It looked like the attic was my only option I had. Each step up the ladder was a painful labor as I made my way. I took the heavy boxes of old toys and clothing to block the entrance. Thankfully, Tommy kept his laptop charged at all times. This was going to be a lot. I've been up here for hours. At least I'm spending this time surrounded by the memories that have been collecting dust. I can still hear the myriad of sirens wailing in the distance. The small vent up here is giving me a glimpse of the birth of a new sun rising. The dawning sky is being clouded by the smoke rolling off the Ferris wheel. I was rarely ever awake to see the sunrises around here. They truly are beautiful. I did what I had to do, and now you know the terrible truth. I don't even know if I was successful. I do know I did what I thought was right. I'd hate to hurt the flow of revenue for this town more than I already have, but I strongly suggest visiting elsewhere next summer. Mom, if I just accepted your love and help, I wouldn't be in this mess. I wasn't the only person who lost someone. My pain wasn't more important than yours. I was selfish. I was angry. I needed someone to blame, and I took it out on you. None of this is your fault, and I'm sorry. I love you. To Angie's parents, as unbelievable as the story is, I promise you until my dying breath it's the truth. Your daughter had the misfortune of crossing my path, and I'm sorry. I would give anything to trade places and give her back to you. To Paradise Point, I would imagine I'm not welcome back. As much as it pains me to have set a fire to an effigy of anybody's memory, I promise you there are worse things in this life.
You can choose to believe me. You can choose to twist the story into the paranoid delusions of a local drunk. I don't really care. Whatever you choose to do, I implore it to be this. Don't go under the boardwalk.
Well, now would be as good a time as any for a drink. Probably gonna be the last for a long time. It might be for the best, right? Here's to you. If you made it this far, maybe you believe me. Here's to the monster trying to eat us all from the inside out. God, I'm gagging. Why the hell was this warm? I pulled it from the freezer, didn't I? This isn't brandy. I can't stop coughing. There's something on the floor. Is that a tooth?